Well, tonight we're going to be talking about specific instructions for the priests in 21. So you didn't think that all of Leviticus was about the priests, and pretty much is, but these are specific instructions for the priests. Yeah, I don't know if Brother Bill watches anymore or not, so. Verse 1 through 4. And the Lord said unto Moses, Speak unto the priests, the sons of Aaron, and say unto them, There shall none be defiled for the dead among his people, but for his kin, that is near unto him, that is for his mother, his father, his son, his daughter, or for his brother, and for his sister, a virgin, that it is nigh unto him, which he hath had no husband, which had no husband. For her he may be defiled, but he shall not defile himself, being a chief man among his people, to profane himself. It's continuing on from last week, and what is talking about the duties of the priests. And in this particular case, we read about earlier that the people, if they come into contact with a dead person or a dead animal or anything, they had to go and wash and be ceremonial cleansed for that day. But the priests are a little bit higher level than that. Okay, they can't. It's a little different than what we have today. The priests couldn't attend a funeral unless it was very close, one of their kin. Okay, so where today the ministry is usually leading the funeral, that's not the way it was back then. It was, family member or whoever, and then and you got to remember, it's different times. They didn't go into it as much. In the Jewish tradition still, I think, is to get them buried as quickly as they can. They don't waste much time. I'm sure that each one of them is different, but
I think it's about 3 days.
3 days. I think it may be different for each one of them, but they're trying to get them in the ground quick. And the main reason is because of that. They're just going to start decaying. I'm not real sure. I didn't go down through here and read this, but I didn't remember anything in here that says why, but it just says that they want to do that. Just a reminder that the priests came from the tribe of Levi, but specifically from the tribe of Aaron, or the family of Aaron. Okay, we're speaking to the priests, which specifically is the sons of Aaron, as we said. The purpose of these laws was to illustrate the purity and separation from sin that was to characterize the priest. A dead body is a picture of sin's result in this world, especially in the way the body quickly rots. Any contact with a dead body was thought to make a person ritually unclean. And we go back and we can read about what we did earlier in Leviticus. And then also you can go to Numbers 19. They clarify it a little bit more there also. Another reasons is because, in contrast, most of the pagan religions of Israel's neighbors, the priests did not prepare dead bodies for burial. Holiness gives life. God did not want his holy priest to be closely associated with death. Okay? But by life, God also didn't want his priests anywhere near death cults of the pagans. The pagans, they celebrated death almost, as far as they'd mutilate sometimes some of those. It says, by touching the dead body or abiding in the same house with it, or assisting at the funerals, or eating of the funeral feast. Okay, so they couldn't partake of any of that they had to. The priests couldn't, unless they were a very close relative, and it listed them out there.
Sister had to be a virgin. She couldn't have been like a widower.
Right. And it does take, it doesn't mention a wife, okay, here. But if you go and look in Ezekiel 24, it talks about him, Ezekiel, the priest, a priest, mourning and taking care of his wife, after she died. You can go through and read that. So it's same thing. It would be like a near relative, of course, by marriage that way. Verse 5, Brother Epperson.
Says, "You shall not make baldness upon their head, neither shall they shave off a corner of their beard, nor make any cuttings in their flesh."
Okay. Now this isn't against bald people. Okay. Some people, bald people, that's just the way it is. Dan, he shaved his head completely clean. This is going back to the pagan religion that they did at that time. They would, when they had a dead relative, they might shave a little part out here and keep it shaved all the time. Same thing with the emblems on the body. They may tattoo it, or they may even cut something in their body, a scar, to remember that person. It doesn't want that. Again, it's putting death first, and God wants life first. He doesn't want death. It says this has nothing to do with the natural baldness, but involves the intentional shaving of a part of the head to make a bald spot. This was done by some to mourn the dead. This appears to have been a general custom among the heathen. In the book, it's another book, not the Bible, but it's a historical book of Baruch, chapter 6, verse 31. The priests of Babylon are representing sitting in their temples with their clothes rent and their heads and their beards shaven and having nothing upon their heads. So that was one of the pagan religions that they would do, or rites that they would do in these particular times. And it's just, here again, trying to set the priests of God apart. And then it also talks about making cuttings in their flesh. They did that. It says the prophets of Baal cut themselves to impress their false god. The priests who serve Yahweh, the God of Israel, were prohibited from doing this in mourning rites or any other context. We read that also in a couple of early chapters that we've talked about. Okay. Do you want to read tonight, or okay, 6 through 9?
They shall be holy unto their God, and not profane the name of their God. For the offerings of the Lord made a fire, and the bread of their God they do offer. Therefore they shall be holy. They shall not take a wife that is a whore or profane. Neither shall they take a woman put away from her husband, for he is holy unto his God. Thou shalt sanctify him, therefore, for he offereth the bread of thy God, and he shall be holy unto thee. For I, the Lord, which sanctify you, am holy. And the daughter of any priest, if she profane herself by playing the whore, she profaneth her father. She shall be burnt with fire.
Okay. So this is talking about when they get married, when the priests are married, that there are specifics that they have to go into here. They shall be holy unto God, and we see this, it's repeated again, for God is holy. It's repeated in here, but chapters back it was repeated several times in that one chapter. It said, they shall not profane their name. This summarizes the reason for the commands to the priests in his chapter. God wanted them to be holy and to display holiness to the people. To be profane is to be the opposite of being holy. Definition that Peter Contesi had, one may also say to dishonor or bring disgrace on or bring shame to, is another way of profane, being profane. Said, for they offer the offerings of the Lord made by fire and bread of their gods. This holiness was important for the priests because they performed their sacrifices burnt on the altar. They also daily brought the new bread into the tabernacle, the bread that pictured Israel's fellowship with God. Only the priests could do these things, and their special privileges meant they also had special responsibilities. So, because of these things, they had to separate themselves out. and then it goes in and says, because you're a priest, this is the type of woman. Does this remind you anything in the New Testament? Paul talks about one part, the office of a bishop, being married to one woman, and then the office of a deacon, and goes into that. So this is very similar. I mean, not saying it's the same, but it's the same understanding. They want to be separate. They want to be different from these, because the religions at the time were just the opposite. It's like, how many times could they have sex in their pagan ritual that would help the god? Well, that's totally opposite of what God wants. He said, no, I want you with one, I told you before, one man, one woman, and it's got to be, and for the priest, it's got to be a specific woman, per se. Said actually the term bread of their God includes the showbread, but also all the other sacrificed foods. Didn't go into that part, but remember, some of the priests, they would get a portion of it, of the food, of the sacrifice, and the different sacrifices they had. The burnt offering they didn't, but some of the others they did. The wheat, the wine, the drink offering. So all this, they could, so that they could participate in that, they had to obey these rules to keep themselves holy. The priests were only to take virgins for wives. This meant they could not marry a woman who was a harlot, a woman who was defiled in some way, or a woman who was divorced. It says it's unclear if marriage to a widow was allowed. Well, that's what this author said, but I went back and read Matthew Henry, and Matthew Henry said it was okay. Now, I don't know.
Per se. Mine there was talking about a widow. In other words, it gets into it more, I think,
Yeah.
that they did this because so the kid would be pure.
Right. That's exactly right.
Because especially the boys, they would be in line with
the priest. That's right. They would be
the purity. Okay, they represented God. Okay, they represented God, and they were held to a very high standard, a higher standard than anybody else. And I mentioned that. I think I don't mind that because God's called me to do something.
Sure.
And of course, when your kids get grown and all that, but there's a lot to that, and you carry we're in a way we're God's representative.
Right.
All of us are, okay.
Right.
But again, you get to ministry and.
But it goes back to the thing of what you want to be. You want to be a pastor, this is how it is. What really, I guess, appalls me is when you get on, watch the news and see something like a police officer and then they're doing something and they're arrested. It's just like, they know the law, they ought to uphold the law. What's the deal? And it's the same thing with the priests. This is, it's set forth and they are set up for a higher duty. Yeah, they have to go through a lot of training and, and doctors and all these things. Whatever it is, lawyers, all that, they are set up for specifics. And if you see somebody doing something opposite of what it should be, then you're like, boy, that really rubs you raw, kind of.
Do we know if one of the priests had a brother that died and his wife, they didn't have any children,
right,
was that priest also expected to go ahead and marry for his brother and raise up one to carry on the seed, or how was that?
I don't know. It's different because the Levites didn't have any land. Okay?
Right.
We haven't gotten into that yet, but that was specifically set up by Moses, from God, for a particular, to get an allotment of land. So I don't know if that is. It's not mentioned in here.
I've never read anything.
No, I haven't either. And so, and I don't know if any of the, now,
the only thing would be that she would be a widow without children.
right.
And if they did have children, it would be of the course, you know, of the
Mhm.
lineage.
Yeah, it'd still be in the family, so to speak.
But
So,
if the children's already grown, would that make a difference?
well, this is if they hadn't had any children,
Oh, I see.
okay? What Harold's
Yeah,
talking about.
If she already had grown children when he died, then I've not read anything that he was obligated to go ahead
No,
and take her because the lineage was already going on.
right, they would get a portion of whatever, you know, from their lineage, what they
It would
had.
be up to their children's
Yeah.
offsprings to support that.
Well, that's right. That's what they're supposed to do.
But since there was no allotments, I wasn't sure how it worked on
I
the Levites.
I don't know. I haven't ran into that, and I haven't seen that question.
Well, even
asked out.
in the New Testament, they really hit heavy on, again, I don't, but a true widow.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
someone that had children and her husband died, she
Mhm.
had no way to support them.
Right.
Or she was an older woman
Mhm.
in years and couldn't support herself. That was the church's responsibility and the family's responsibility
Right.
to
Yes.
take care of those people.
Right. And it may be that, you know, their children died or they were still living with their mother and didn't have any support. So, you know, they would have to go out and try to do the best they can. And that's where it says in several places where we read, you know, leave some grain for the poor people and leave this and that, you know, in the fields so they can have it, so they can make part of it.
I have a question.
Yes.
These priests that were to take a pure person for their wife, were they supposed to take someone of the lineage and the family of being a Levite, or could they take any Jew as a wife?
I think they could take any Jew, but if they want to keep the lineage, it goes with the male. So I think by that time, I don't know, I'd have to go back. I can't remember. I looked that up once, how many priests there would have been at that time.
Well, you know, it just said, like in verse 14, we haven't read it yet, but I read on down a little bit. But he shall take a virgin of his own people to wife. So I didn't know if that meant of another Levite, a woman that was a Levite, or any of the Jew that, you know, the Jewish tribe.
I don't know. Let's see if it says anything in here. I don't think it says anything in there. We'll read it here in just a minute, and we'll go through that to see if there's any more. 10 through 15, do you want to read that, Bertha? On page 5.
And he that is the high priest among his brethren, upon whose head the anointing oil was poured, and that is consecrated to put on the garments, shall not uncover his head, nor rend his clothes. Neither shall he go into any dead body, nor defile himself or his father or for his mother. Neither shall he go out of the sanctuary, nor profane the sanctuary of his God. For the crown of anointing oil of his God is upon him. I am the Lord. And he shall take a wife in her virginity, a widow or a divorced woman, or profane or an harlot, that shall he not take, but he shall take a virgin of his own people's wife. Neither shall he profane his seed among the people, for I, the Lord, do sanctify him.
We kind of switched a little bit. We're talking about priests in the previous verses. This set of verses is talking about the high priest. Okay? So there's only one of them. So that's why it's even elevated even more. It goes on that they can't touch a dead body. They're even their mom and dad's. They can't do anything that, you know, they have to be a virgin that they marry, like you said. It says the high priest had a special responsibility to honor and illustrate the holiness of God. He had that special anointing oil that was put upon him, and to the special garments. The laws that applied to other priests applied to him, but are stated here for even greater emphasis. When we read the high priest and his special anointing and garments, we consider Jesus. Jesus was the high priest, but not after the order of Aaron. He was the high priest after the order of Melchizedek. It says this is the first place in the Bible where this title is introduced. The title is very emphatic, and I can't pronounce it, Hakom Haggadol. Okay, I guess that's the way it, that priest or the great one is the way it's translated. The common priests were commanded to not defile themselves for the dead, not coming near a dead body. But an exception was made for close relatives. However, the high priest was prohibited from mourning or coming into contact with any dead body, even his mother and her father. Israel as a nation was called to holiness, yet the priests were called to greater holiness. In turn, the high priest was called to greater holiness even than the common priests. The threefold degree of holiness among the Israelites, the people, the priests, and the high priest, corresponds to the graduation of holiness in the tabernacle, at the outer court, the holy place, and the most holy place. To uncover their head or to tear their clothes was dramatic signs of horror or mourning for the dead. The high priest who sat at the trial of Jesus tore his clothes in a dramatic display of horror that Jesus claimed to be God. It is, of course, implied that if this is not done for the high priest's own parents, it must certainly not be done for any of the other close relatives mentioned. And this goes back to when Miriam died, and Aaron was instructed, don't you mourn. Don't mourn. If you go back just a couple chapters, Moses told him, God told him, don't mourn for her. You know, and it's just one of those. Go ahead.
But there in that commentary, it may mention that they were not to have any excessive mourning,
Right.
Because they were more life.
Mm-hmm.
And a priest offered life, and they didn't deal in death, they dealt in life.
Right.
And that pattern, and that again, that the purity of everything, again, you get into the thing about what God thought about sin and what he thought about his ministry.
Says in C here, the common priests were also commanded to not take a wife of a divorced woman or harlot or defiled woman. The high priest, the standard is even higher. He could not marry a widow. His wife had to be a virgin of his own people. But it doesn't go on to explain what that means. If that's that tribe. I kind of, since it's talking about, what I would say, if I was thinking about it, that may be why Moses wasn't part of the high priest, because his wife wasn't Jewish at all. I mean, now she may have come into the Jewish family, and her father worshiped God. We know that because, it talked about it when he was there. He was telling him some good things to do. So maybe that's why that Aaron was chosen, because he had a wife that was of the same tribe of Levi. Because I think it does mean the tribe of Levi. So they would have to marry, but I'm not sure. Because as you branch out from Levi, you got 400 years, and there's been lots of people all down through there. So I kind of think that's what it means, his own people. Not just Jewish, because it could be any Jewish woman that fit that. Yeah, it could be.
But it did specifically say a virgin of his own people.
Right.
So it made reference, it took the time to make a reference to it.
Mm-hmm.
So you do think that maybe there was a reason
You
for
know
that reference.
You know it's at least Israelite.
Yeah. And here again, I think it's a purity thing. If they were the tribe of Levi, then the children are actually going to be okay too. They're going to be consecrated, and just like their family was as they go on through, they're going to be, because that's that's kind of the question that I have today when they start doing the sacrifices again. How in the world are you going to know that you came from the tribe of Levi? I mean, you know, the priests that they're going to have to make the offer and make the sacrifices, they know, supposedly. I don't know how they know, if they kept record or kept a history or, you know, I just don't know. But it's an interesting question for sure. Harold, do you want to read 16 through 24?
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Aaron, saying, Whosoever he be of thy seed in their generations that hath any blemish, let him not approach to offer the bread of his God. For whatsoever man he be that hath a blemish, he shall not approach a blind man or a lame, or he that hath a flat nose or anything superfluous, or a man that is broken-footed or broken-handed, or crook-backed, or a dwarf, or that hath a blemish in his eye, or be scurvy or scabbed, or hath his stones broken. No man that hath a blemish of the seed of Aaron, and the priest shall come nigh to offer the offerings of the Lord made by fire. He hath a blemish, he shall not come nigh to offer the bread of his God. He shall eat the bread of his God, both of the most holy and of the holy. Only he shall not go in unto the veil, nor come nigh unto the altar, because he hath a blemish, that he profane not my sanctuaries. For I, the Lord, do sanctify them. And Moses told it unto Aaron and to his sons, and unto all the children of Israel.
Okay. Now here it's specifically talking about the children of Israel. Anybody that's going to be a priest, if there's some kind of deformity that they have, and it listed several out there, they did not want them to be part of going to the sanctuary and doing any of the business in the sanctuary. Now it does say that they could help the priests, you know, if they're sewing the curtains up or sewing new clothes or doing things like that, they could help, but it says this shows God's standard for those who would come before him in the service as priests. The command against priestly service for those with physical defects was meant to point to the even more obvious need to be free from spiritual defects when coming to God. It says every animal that had to be brought before the Lord had to be without blemish. Here we see that the priest who offered the sacrifice also had to be without blemish. The perfection in both the sacrifice and the priest was not true perfection. It was in comparison to it was only in comparison to the other. The combination of the perfect offering and the perfect offerer, of course, was Jesus Christ. It goes through and it lists all these. In 4 there, it says, only he shall not go near the veil. This expression, near the veil, means to go into the first part of the sanctuary, to put bread on the table, to light the lamps, and to burn the incense to God. In the intertestamental days, or between New Testament and Old Testament, Antigonus had the ears of the high priest Hyrcanus cut off so that he would be disqualified from being high priest. So Antigonus was one of the rulers at the time, and Hyrcanus was the high priest. So he cut his ears off, so he could be no more high priest. That was a deformity. Kind of hurtful, isn't it?
But they could partake of the bread. I mean,
Yeah, they could.
The family, they got to continue to eat with the family.
They would eat with the family. The priests that got the bread, the showbread that was bringing out every day, the extra meat that they had, the food, the grain, the wine, all that offering, they could participate in that. They just couldn't approach the tabernacle.
Was it he could only eat with his own family, and he could not share or be with any other families?
No, it's the meat that was offered for the priests. See, the priests, they didn't go out and hunt. They didn't go out and get their own food. They didn't do any of that. They didn't do the gardening. all they had to rely upon was the people bringing in the sacrifices for what they could do. So now they would take some of the meat and they would trade. You know, you get so much meat you can't eat. They want some vegetables too. They would trade, you know, I'm sure back and forth to get other things. But this was something for them. It says this. It says one with a defect, his God. This means that Yahweh was still the God of that one, and did not exclude him from the relationship, only from very specific priestly services. Our involuntary weakness shall not debar us from benefit by Christ. So just because you have a defect doesn't mean, you know, and you look today, it's like, well, I got
And they
these.
could only accept the
Is that
pure.
a defect? You know.
They couldn't accept any blemished animals right that time.
No, not for sacrifices.
Yeah.
So.
They, one of the things that they mentioned that you know, the world's broken.
Right.
And we do have, you know, but now under grace, you know, God is,
Oh, yeah.
you know, we don't have to have, we only have to have one high priest.
Right.
And he's sitting by the Father right now. And he's making intercession for each and every one of us.
It also goes back to against the pagans. The pagans was just the opposite. They would, you know, you would think anybody that wanted to be would be a priest. I don't know exactly. I haven't studied it that much, but there was real strict rules for these. I'm sure they had some rules too. They may have been a certain family or the richest or whatever. I don't know what it was. But they didn't, definitely, as far as we know, didn't have anything as far as animals. When they sacrificed, and they even sacrificed their own children, you know. If, in their eyes, if that child's deformed, that's okay anyway, even if it wasn't deformed. That's a sacrifice that they had. It's just, again, to separate out from the people of Israel versus the people of the Palestine.
Because every one of these things, just about if you study any, you know, either religion at that time, just about every one of these things, this is what they did.
Right.
I mean, what God taught against. You know, they cut themselves, you know, and remember remember when the prophets of Baal, they cut themselves and hollered and all that other kind of stuff. And God, you know, he's come out from it. And again, I believe that's why he wants his priests to be separate.
Right.
And his ministers to be, you know.
And it's still, yeah, like you say, it's still today, even in the New Testament, there's a higher standard for them set forth. So, well, it's short tonight. Do you want to go ahead and try to get on the next one, 21 or 22? Or do you want to, it's more specific instructions. It's back there. I printed them off, so
I'll be kind enough to pass them off.
we can do that, or we can just do it next week. We can blaze through it. 22, 1 through 3, and you'll see it here in just a minute. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Aaron and to his sons, that they separate themselves from the holy things of the children of Israel, that they profane not my holy name in those things which they hallow unto me. I am the Lord. Say unto them, Whosoever he be of all your seed among your generations that goeth unto the holy things, which the children of Israel hallow unto the Lord, having his uncleanness upon him, that soul shall be cut off from the presence of the Lord. So it's pushing them out. Again, this is just additional instructions for the priests that he has to tell Aaron to separate themselves from these holy things. It says the priests of Israel often dealt with things that had been declared holy. The altar, the table of showbread, the golden lampstand, the altar of incense, they were all holy things. They didn't belong to the priests. They belonged to the Lord. So there was a sense of separation from the holy things that the priests had to observe. To fail to do so was profane God's name. They had a lot of tools and things that they made to do it, with the showbread and with the altar. So that's where they're setting themselves, separating themselves. It says a wide range of different translations for they that separate themselves agree with today's English version meaning the verb is treat with respect, be careful with, or be scrupulous about. Whenever you're in a position that you're going to participate in this, because those items are holy, you have to be holy. That's why they had to cleanse themselves and do all these before they even come into the tabernacle. Okay. Whoever goes near the holy things with the children of Israel dedicate to the Lord, then cleanliness was upon them, and they were cut off. Here again, the people had to be careful. If you didn't follow the rules like God wanted it to, you're going to be cut off. The meaning of the expression is clarified of one that is frequently used in the Old Testament, to stand before someone, which means to serve someone. So the words to be cut off from before someone means to be no longer allowed to serve that person. And that's what it's talking about. I mean, they can no longer be a priest. They will be set aside. All the ceremonies and rituals of the Old Covenant pointed towards a perfect fulfillment by Jesus the Messiah under the New Covenant. Therefore, the idea that a priest could not serve in a ceremonial defiled condition was important. Fellowship with God had to be done on the basis of being declared clean and righteous by God. God does the same thing today. When somebody comes to him and wants to change his life, God cleanses them, okay, to make them where they can come into it. Now, there's nothing, we don't see anything on the outside, but the person should change. Okay, Brother Epperson, you want to read 4 through 8?
What man soever of the seed of Aaron is a leper, or hath a running issue, he shall not eat the holy things until he be clean. And who shall touch anything that is unclean by the dead, or a man whose seed goeth from him, or whosoever touches any creeping thing, whereby he may be made unclean, or a man of whom he may take uncleanness whatsoever uncleanness he hath, the soul which he hath touched, any such shall be unclean until evening, and shall not eat of the holy things unless he wash his flesh with water. And when the sun is down, he shall be clean, and shall afterwards eat of the holy things, because it is his food. That which dieth of itself, or is torn with beast, he shall not eat or defile himself therewith. I am the Lord.
So it doesn't, kind of, who is a leper or has a discharge shall not eat the holy things. Now, the discharge I can understand, but it's like if it's a leper, they shouldn't be in there anyway. Well, we remember that if they had leprosy, they had to there were certain time periods. They, wait 7 days and check it out again, wait 7 days, check it out again before you would be deemed clean or unclean. So in this time period, they couldn't participate with the leprosy or these others that they've listed here if you've been unclean. Again, it's showing holiness for the sacrifice and holiness for the priests. It said violations of these would not ruin a man's career as a priest. It would only make the priest ceremonially unclean until evening. Once the ceremonial cleanliness was restored, they could be restored to their priestly service. Here again, it talks about he washes his body with water. That's just a cleansing part of it. Whenever they go in and they're doing sacrifices to that, even if you're not going into the tabernacle, they still have to do this cleansing, okay, to be counted clean again. I'm going to read 9. Iris?
They shall therefore keep mine ordinance, lest they bear sin for it and die therefore. If they profane it, I, the Lord, do sanctify them.
It says, God set the priests apart for his own pleasure and purpose. This great blessing carried with it a great responsibility. He who has given more will be accountable for more. It's like one of these things. You want the job, you got to do certain things, and that's part of it. Uh, 10 through 13, Bertha, could you read that for us?
Therefore shall no longer, there shall no longer stranger eat of the holy thing. A sojourner of the priest or an hired servant shall not eat of the holy thing. But if the priest buy any soul with his money, he shall eat of it, and he that is born in his house, they shall eat of his meat. If the priest's daughter also be married unto a stranger, she may not eat of an offering of the holy things. But if the priest's daughter be a widow or divorced and had no child, and is returned into her father's house as in her youth, she shall eat of her father's meat, but there shall be no stranger eat thereof.
Okay. So here we're going back and talking about a little bit about this from last chapter, Janet. So if they're a stranger, okay, so that to me, that means that they can't be outside the Jewish people. They could marry, the priest could marry somebody outside the tribe of Levi. I mean, that's kind of what it means to me. And still be part of it.
When it says stranger, that means a non-Jewish person.
Right, sojourner or stranger, it talks about it's somebody that's come in that's not of the tribe of Levi. But it does say a slave in the priest's household could eat of it. So if they were somebody's servant that was coming to them, they could, as could an adult daughter who came back into their father's home. The command against giving the priest's portion to a visitor in the priest's home went somewhat against the strong custom of hospitality in that culture, which normally insisted on giving guests the very best that they had to offer. Outsider. The word was also used, however, those who do not belong to the priesthood. In Exodus 29 and Numbers 3, chapter 3, there's several verses in 18. It may therefore be rendered a layman, somebody outside the priestly order. Then it talks about the priest's daughter if she comes back in there. A New Testament parallel pertains to those who reside in the home of believer priests in 1 Corinthians 7 and 14. The priest's family and household were entitled to eat the holy offering, and ancient Israel's slaves were normally regarded as part of the family. The issue of slavery will be dealt with in the next chapter, 25. But Adam Clark has comments that are helpful. We see that it was lawful under the Mosaic economy to have slaves under certain restrictions, but these were taken from among the heathen and instructed in the true religion. Hence we find, as in the above case, that they reckoned as part of the priest's own family and treated as such. They certainly have privileges which do not extend to sojourners or to hired servants. So it is a little bit different. It says, therefore, the situation was incomparably better than the situation of the slaves under different European governments, of whose souls the pitiless possessors in general take no care, while they themselves venture to profess the Christian religion and quote the Mosaic law in vindication of their system of slavery. That's just preposterous, the conduct that they have. 14 through 16, Harold.
And if a man eat of the holy thing unwittingly, then he shall put the fifth part whereof unto it, and shall give it unto the priest with the holy thing. And they shall not profane the holy things of the children of Israel, which they offer unto the Lord, or suffer them to bear the iniquity of trespass when they eat of the holy things. For I, the Lord, do sanctify them.
You wouldn't think it'd be possible, but it says here it was possible for someone considered an outsider to eat the portion reserved for the priest and his family. When that happened, they were commanded to make the common restitution required to holy things, to restore it, and then add a fifth to it. So if they ate a Big Mac, they'd have to pay back a Big Mac and add a fifth of it. A couple bites.
Well, don't you know, every time we read this, we're going over it again, and I see why Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, all these things, sometimes they cover this stuff over and over again. It take a long time to know all this stuff.
Yeah, it did. Like if that happened, okay, this is what I do. Okay, I got to go look back in the law books and figure out what
scrolls out, go through those scrolls.
Go through it all over again.
Well, they had to be keeping very good records to stay on top of this.
Sure. 17 through 21, Janet.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Aaron and to his sons, and unto all the children of Israel, and say to them, Whatsoever he be of the house of Israel, or of the strangers in Israel, that will offer his oblation for all his vows, and for all his freewill offerings, which they will offer unto the Lord for a burnt offering, you shall offer at your own will a male without blemish of the beeves, of the sheep, or of the goats. For whatsoever hath a blemish, that shall you not offer, for it shall not be acceptable for you.
Yeah.
You want me to go?
Yeah.
And whosoever offereth a sacrifice of peace offerings unto the Lord to accomplish his vow, or freewill offering in beeves or sheep, it shall be perfect to be accepted. There shall be no blemish therein.
Okay. Just reiterating what we talked about before, the sacrifices had to be perfect, as perfect as they could be, no blemishes in them. And the beeves is cattle. It's talking about cattle. That's what that refers to. Here again, the Old English kind of gets us a little bit. It says several places before this, God declared that blemished, defective, or deformed animals were unacceptable to the Lord, sacrificed for the Lord. The priests were responsible to make certain that an animal brought for sacrifice did not have an observable blemish or defect. You know how now they're getting ready to do the sacrifices, getting set for it. Well, in order to do that, they have to burn a red heifer, and that red heifer has to be perfect. And the red heifer can't have no more, I don't remember if it's 10 or 11 or something like that, white hairs, other than red. It can't be any like that. Boy, you talk about purebred. That's a purebred.
You talk about somebody that had to know what he was doing. Yeah. That priest had to know what he was doing,
looking for that, going about it. It's obvious. It was, to me, it was fun when Daniel was in FFA and he had the hogs. First hog we got was one of Bill's. I don't know. Somehow they were related, but they had some piglets, and they said, "Well, I'll give you a piglet." So we went down there and got one. Well, the first show we did. Got a bad, but when they went to the barn, we had to travel to the different, and we didn't have a trailer or anything. So they pinned off a bunch of the good animals, stuck them all with ones. I'll get all myself in trouble. But they pinned them up front. It's a big old long trailer. But then at the back, they just had a big open space, and they crammed the rest of them in. Get them all in there. Well, when they opened it up, Daniel's pig was on the bottom of all those, and all the others came out. He was so stressed out, or it was so stressed out, I can't remember if it was broken, and he died. Before we even got to show it.
Oh.
Yeah, he was in so much stress, and that's part of buying a pig. You have to know what the stress problems are with it, and it's more of a wildest pig. So from then on, we bought from the teacher. He told us where to go buy a little bit better pig. But it's just amazing when they go and judge them, when they're going back and forth. All I see is just animals walking back and forth. And then they get up there and say, "Oh, this one's good, this has this, and this has that." I'm like, Man, I can't see that. It's just like judging dogs or judging any kind of animals.
You kind of have to be raised up around.
You do have to, and you have to know what to look for, and all that stuff. So, anyway, that's my little 2 cents. So all these, it brings about that they have to be a perfect sacrifice, as perfect, as unblemished as possible. So, and in this particular case, they pointed out male, and in most cases it was, but we know some of the sacrifices it didn't have to be male. But for this one, they're talking about that. Oh, and then it goes on and talks about how Jesus, of course, was the perfect sacrifice. And we talked about that. Just that's the opposite of being defective. He was perfect in his nature, both God and man. He was perfect in his motives, in his attitude, in his obedience, and in his sacrifice for sin on our behalf. 22 and 23. Blind or broken or maimed or having a wen or scurvy or scab, ye shall not offer these unto the Lord, nor make an offering by fire of them unto the altar unto the Lord, either a bullock or a lamb that hath anything superfluous or lacking in its parts, that mayest that thou offer for a freewill offering, but for a vow it shall not be accepted. Okay? So here it's a little bit, it's going on. These are blemishes that might be caused by a birth defect, such as an animal that came out maimed, diseased, scabs, something. These were not acceptable, of course, for sacrifices. It says it lists 6 defects that made the animal unacceptable. The Bible says we should offer ourselves to God as what? A living sacrifice, ourselves. This passage just reminds us of what kind of sacrifice we should be. We shouldn't be blind. It should be with eyes wide open to the goodness and glory of God. Our living sacrifice should not be broken. It should be whole and complete. Our living sacrifice should not be deformed or maimed. It should not be with an inactive arm or leg, but instead be ready to serve. And our living sacrifice should not be with ulcers, scabs, or disease, and troubled flesh for all these to see. So that goes about to us that we have to live our lives as much unblemished as we can before people. Now, we're going to have problems. And it's how we react to problems is usually what people see in us. And how, Jesus, when he got mad, turned the tables over and was knocking the money changers over, everybody's like, oh man, what's he, that's not the way he should be reacted. Well, he did it anyway because they were basically making a mockery of the temple, because that's where they were selling their wares, getting ready to make the sacrifices. They went there and bought whatever they had, and they wasn't trying to get their best. They just, the people that sold them was trying to give them the best. But so it was more or less something set up for them to make money, and that's what Jesus is trying to put them against. Brother Everson, 24 and 25.
You shall not offer unto the Lord that which is bruised or crushed or broken or cut. Neither shall you make any offering thereof in your hand, neither from a stranger's hand shall you offer the bread of your God, or any of these, because their corruption is in them, and the blemish be in them. They shall not be accepted for you.
Okay. Here again, if the animal was bruised or crushed or torn apart or any way mishandled, it shouldn't be used for a sacrifice. It says the idea of castration is not clear in the New King James translation, but it is in many others. New American Standard, also anything with its testicles bruised or crushed or torn or cut, you shall not offer to the Lord. And most modern translations agree with that. That was just another defect that they had, that you shouldn't offer that to the Lord. Nor from a foreigner's hand. If a foreigner give you something to offer it, it's not, you have to get it yourself. It has to be one of yours. It says God would not accept such defective sacrifices from an Israelite or a foreigner. If an Israelite bought a castrated animal from a foreigner's hand, they couldn't offer it. Okay? It's one of those things. You just can't do that. And then 26 through 30, you want to read that?
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, When a bullock or a sheep or a goat is brought forth, then it shall be 7 days under the dam, and from the 8th day and henceforth it shall be accepted for an offering made by fire unto the Lord. And whether it be cow or ye shall not kill it, and her young both in 1 day. And when ye will offer a sacrifice of thanksgiving unto the Lord, offer it at your own will. On the same day it shall be eaten up. Ye shall leave none of it until the morrow. I am the Lord.
So it's giving an age bracket. Now, don't give the babies week old. You got to have them a little bit older than that. Okay, it's basically what it's saying. And also, don't kill the mama and the baby in the same day. You know, you take the baby or take the mama one day, but not the other. It's just saying you shouldn't do that.
Was that because they couldn't eat it all in 1 day?
Well, part of it, but right up here it says that was to imitate a Canaanite fertility ritual, that you would eat both the mother and the child in the same day. I mean, sacrifice it. The Canaanite ritual was. So it's to try to again separate it out from these rituals that was already approved by Canaanites and going through. So these laws may have had a polemical function against pagan practices. I don't know what that word means, but I think what we've been saying. Or they may merely promote sensitivities and high regard for life. Either one, that you need to not do it. Now, one of the things that I've heard it many times, but never, it's like a light bulb going off on me. Don't boil something in the mother's milk. And I didn't know the Jewish people, the ritual Jewish people, they won't eat meat and drink milk at the same meal. That's where they get that from. And I was like, wow, I didn't, so cheese, anything like that. They eat cheese by itself, eat grapes, all that. But don't eat the meat with it. They bring it that far, that boiling the in the own mother's milk.
Okay, go back to verse 27.
Okay.
Explain that. When it, then it shall be 7 days under the dam or day, whatever.
Yeah, dam is the same meaning, dame, what we'd say, female. So it's 8th day. It has to be, don't sacrifice one that's a week old. It has to be more than a week old before you sacrifice it.
Okay, what's the purpose? I don't understand that one.
Well, it's just telling them you got to give the thing some life. Don't.
What's
the difference in a week later?
Yeah, what's the difference?
Well, it's like it's still, most time it's still weaning, and it would be for a time after that even. So it says it was prohibited to offer an animal less than 8 days old. This was unnecessarily cruelty to a newborn animal, and the practice was probably performed in pagan sacrifices to idols. So that's about all they can say about it. So I guess it's one of those things, the younger it is, the more perfect it is, you'd think. But it wants a little bit of age to it to see if it is. It may be deformed, it may be defective, and it takes a little while for that to come up, or it may change and not have whatever, a skin rash or something on it. So that's the only thing that I could say, that they want to make sure that it's good. Animals do grow pretty fast, I know that. I mean, not in a week, but still, yeah, it would be a big change. I know we kept, go back to the pig story. We got the pig. Well, the barn wasn't ready up there at the FFA. The kids could rent a space in the barn, but it wasn't ready. So we put it in our backyard, and it's a dog run, basically. It's a pretty good sized dog run. And it was about 2 weeks that we had it. And it was a small one. We put him in a dog cage, carried him home in a dog cage. But by the time we took him up to the, 2 weeks later, when we took him up to the barn, we had to get something bigger because he was big. He was my in the dog cage out there, dog pen back there. What we had both of our air conditioners. He got behind one of those, and man, I thought he was going to tear the thing out, trying to get. Oh, geez, well, he started moving it all over the place. I was whacking him on the head. Get back! Get back! Get back! He was trying to hide because we was trying to get him up in the trailer, you know. No, just in that small amount of time, 2 or 3 weeks, we put a bowling ball out there for him to play with because they said that would keep him occupied, and he did. He played with that, or she did. She played. She'd roll that thing all around, you know. And of course, they like to root and make ditches and stuff. Now that the bowling ball's still there, I can tell you. I mowed the grass right over the bowling ball because he made a ditch big enough that it fell in it. And I didn't dig it up. It's up out of the grass about that high. And
How did your garden look while he was in the yard?
No, he wasn't in there. But we got a dog after that. And the dog would go after that bowling ball. And there's scratches in that bowling ball. That dog would dig and dig and dig on it. It's that hard stuff. See that scratches on it. Just amazing.
This says, must leave a newborn animal with its mother for at least 7 days to be acceptable, symbolizing timing, the fullness of the time for Christ to be sacrificed. Galatians chapter 4, verses 4 and 5.
So it's just like they say, it's even more cruel. You would think it'd be killing it. It's cruel, but it's even more cruel. 31 and 32, I don't think we read that. Therefore shall you keep my commandments and do them. I am the Lord, neither shall you profane my holy name, but I will be hallowed among the children of Israel. I am the Lord which hallow you, that brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord. Any questions on that?
Thank you very much.
You know, back when I was at FFA, and you know that, if you bought a calf from a dairy or whatever, even if you bought it in the first couple of days, it was kept with the mama cow till past a week, where it got all the antibodies
Right.
and everything before they went ahead and turned it over to you.
Yeah.
Then you got to bottle feed it.
Then you can bottle